Thank
How
you.
many do you need? Yeah, you got it.
Can anyone guess what is depicted in this picture?
Is it a line?
Unemployment.
It is a line.
Food.
I see the words
Coffee
free
and
food.
donut shopping.
Yeah, some free food, unemployment. Does anybody know what time in American history this would have taken
The
place?
1980s.
2018.
Any other guesses?
The 1920s.
1920s and 30s is the correct answer. Imagine living in a time where you couldn't get any loans from the bank and you had a 35% chance of being jobless if your work didn't involve farming. This lifestyle was a reality for many during the Great Depression, which lasted from 1929 to 1939 in the United States. I have studied the Great Depression extensively during the Advanced Placement United States History class I took last year at Bishop Heelan Catholic High School. This was my teacher for the course, Nan Keel. My main 3 points that I will be discussing during this speech are first, why the banks couldn't produce loans, how the stock market crash affected jobs, and how companies were failing and struggled to keep people employed. Banks couldn't produce loans to keep up with demand, so they slowly collapsed and failed. So I've got another question for you guys. How many banks do you think failed in 1933?
Like 83.
A little more than that.
All of them.
40.
500.
400.
9,000.
69?
Not quite 9,000. That was the closest one though. The answer was at least 4,000.
Well,
Now, how many do you think failed in total?
I think about
5,000.
two.
A little more than 5,000.
10,000.
Not quite, but very close. It was just over 9,000 in the 1930s. So in 1933 alone, people who had money deposited in banks lost an estimated 140 billion US dollars, according to the Living History Farm. So in this image, you can see what the comparison of $1 million to $1 billion looks like. Now they lost $140 billion. That is clearly a lot of money, as you can tell from that picture and like the graph that it shows you. People filled street corners trying to get into banks to withdraw their money, but the banks didn't have any money to let them withdraw it. This added to the panic and chaos of an already stressful time, resulting in the immediate failure and closure of many banks. The president at the time of the United States was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he was left with a country in a financial crisis that he had to fix. He declared a nationwide 3-day holiday for the banks to work without the chaos of customers on the streets. He described this as a cooling off period so the banks could take time off to get back up on their feet, so not as many banks would panic and close. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, is a quote that Franklin D. Roosevelt said in 1933. He said this to try and calm the nation when he proposed the idea of the cooling off period and the bank holidays. The situation of people waiting on street corners I described are called bank run-ons, and they were very common. So now, can any of you guys tell me what this modern photo is of?
is that like Boston?
It's in New York, but do you know what part of New York it is?
Wall Street?
It is Wall Street, and this is where the New York Stock Exchange takes place. So this is the photo that was taken recently, and even though the banks failure had a major toll on the American people, the Great Depression is best known for the stock market crash, which had the largest impact on the economy. So can anyone guess what this photo is of?
Black
Times Square.
Tuesday.
This is a Black Tuesday. This is of the same photo as the previous one, but it is in 1929 on Black Tuesday, which is the day when the stock market crashed. So if you could just imagine being a stockbroker or an investor working in New York City, you would go to work like any other normal day, but in that day alone, roughly 9 million shares were traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and that caused a huge panic among investors and large companies. And that's according to the Great Depression Causes website. And the Great Depression was also the deepest and longest lasting economic downturn in the Western industrialized world up until that time. So during the Great Depression, they lost 30 billion US dollars, but if you change that into, with inflation, how the dollar has changed, that would be 367 billion US dollars in 2018. So this is a newspaper from after the stock market crashed. Investors were rushing to pay off their margins. Margins are when you borrow money from a broker to buy more stock, hoping that it'll pay itself off over time. However, since so many stocks were traded in one day, investors got stressed and ran to the banks to try to pay off their margins so they could sell out of all their stocks. But as you remember, all the banks were failing because the banks didn't have this money to give the people back. So all of a sudden withdrawals from the stock market crash did indeed cause the bank panic. And most people with major investments bought on the margin, so they lost most of their life savings trying to pay off their debts. And many of them ended up losing their houses because they were so far in debt. So many of the big name businesses and companies also went bankrupt through the stock market crash. They had to lay off employees to be able to pay off their debts. By 1932, about 25% of the working population was jobless, which was about 15 million people then. If you were to compare that to the 2013 census, that would be the combined populations of New York City, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Dallas. The stock market crash caused millions of people to lose their jobs and led to the economy losing billions of dollars in just a few days. Unemployment during the Great Depression was at a national high, capping an estimated 24.9% according to the History Channel. If you could compare it, it was noted at being 3.7% this fall, so obviously it's changed a lot in the last almost 100 years. Almost every large American corporation had millions in stock in 1929 prior to the crash, so most businesses ended up having to lay off most of their employees. So over 15 million people were out of work at that time, which is again the statistic from the last slide I just showed you. The Great Depression was caused when banks couldn't produce loans, when the stock market crashed on Black Tuesday, and because companies were failing and had to lay off employees. The Great Depression that started in 1929 was a terrible time for American people and businesses. Everyone who lived in this time was impacted in some way, and most people lost their faith in the economy. So as Eleanor Roosevelt, the first lady during that time, once said, "A good leader inspires people to have confidence in the leader, but a great leader inspires people to have confidence in themselves."